second. I'll share my screen. All right. Cool. Nope, don't want to do that. All right. Can you guys all see what's up on my screen now?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Cool. All right. So thanks for being on this today. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is going to be focused around wealth building. We're going to talk about profit, and we're going to also talk about some investment strategies as well. And if you have questions, put them in the chat box, and I will get to your questions, I guess, towards the end. Of course, if you have questions now, you can certainly interrupt now as well. All right. So the first thing we talk about when we talk about wealth is profit, because without profit, we're not going to be able to build wealth. And what I want to accomplish with everybody on this call today is to get you thinking, and to get you thinking about a new way to approach your business, a new way to approach your life, focused around profit, focused around wealth, and sort of building for the future. So the question I always like to ask people when I get started out is, I assume most people on this call are real estate agents, but I recognize there's some people that are not real estate agents on this call. But if you were to stop selling houses tomorrow, or stop doing whatever it is that you do to earn money tomorrow, how much money would you have coming in to fund your life? You don't have to answer that, but think to yourself. And would you have enough would you have enough money coming in to fund your life and to continue supporting your life without selling a house or doing the things that you're doing? So I'd like to ask you that question. And it's more of an internal question for you to really think about, which should guide your focus during this conversation today. Because what I want you to start thinking about is, how do you bring in passive income? How do you start building wealth so that when you stop working, whether that's tomorrow or in 10 years or 30 years from now, that you're having enough money coming in so you can continue to live and fund your life. So in order to have wealth, we have to have profit. So the first three things we're going to talk about is rethinking what you really need, taking baby steps, and then being brilliant at one thing. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about rethinking what you really need. So I want you to take a hard look at your business expenses and figure out what you can really afford. So put your profit margin first. So the first thing you're going to do is allocate money for your profit margin and for your taxes. So a healthy $1 million business should be taking a profit of about 15%. I know the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book talks about a different percentage, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to talk about this in 15%. So that's above and beyond the owners being paid a six-figure salary, then $150,000 reserved for corporate taxes and personal tax responsibilities of the owner. And then the rest of the money is available to be used and run your operations and fund your business. Now, whether you're an individual real estate agent or whether you have a team, you still need to run your business like a business, and your accountant can advise you on how much salary to take and how much to put aside for taxes. But also when you think about your business, you want to think about your profit first. So the most common mistake that people make is, once you figure out what your profit margin should be, it's tempting to try to hit that number as quickly as you possibly can. So if you go full speed, you may not be prepared for it. You may have too many expenses, right? I knew when I grew my business, when we expanded into 13 different locations all in a 1-year period, our expenses went through the roof because we had to sort of front load certain expenses in order to plan for the business that was coming. That's not a great way to do that. But when you're going full speed ahead like that, sometimes you have to do that. So the purpose of this is just to talk about taking baby steps. And you may not be able to cut back fast enough when your business slows down. And now that you're going to start borrowing, that's going to be stealing from yourself. And that defeats the entire system that we're trying to help you guys create. So what should you do to hit your target profit margin? What I want you to do is build it over time. And I want you to start to have the mindset of having a long-term perspective. Now think about that term, long-term perspective, because when we talk about wealth building is the business of the future, right? Theoretically, if you think about it, it's the business of the future. And even if you're wealthy now, you're still building that for the future. So when you stop working, so you want to think about that long-term perspective and building that profit habit slowly so you can build it over time. So the key to that is just starting small, build the profit habit, think in terms of profit mindset, and slowly build it over time to bigger and bigger margins. You start to cut expenses, you start to cut your cost of sale and your overhead, you start to increase top line revenue, which in turn will increase your profit and your bottom line revenue. And try to focus on one thing, be brilliant at one thing. We've talked about this so many times. The question to focus you is, what should you do to increase sales and profit? Don't diversify too much. If we're talking about investing, I am very particular about investing, and I'll tell you more about that as we get further on in the presentation. But I like to buy investment properties that I can walk to every day. And I know that's like a very small circle to be in, but I like to be able to get to all my properties and see them and check up on them and, see what needs to be done. So stay focused, figure out what it is that you want to focus on. Don't diversify too much. Become an expert at one thing. You make money after you hit the same problem 100 times over and over, and you know how to fix it every time perfectly. To get that kind of know-how, you have to specialize in a certain thing, whether that's specializing as a real estate agent in a certain area or a certain property type, specializing as an investor in a certain area or property type. Be the master of one thing and replicate that thing over and over again. Be able to do it faster and faster, be able to do it better and better. And that's the path to making a profit, and that's the path to becoming successful. You can't be all things to all people. I know in our business, if we're talking about real estate, people ask you to do things all the time. Hey, if you're a residential real estate agent, people say, hey, can you sell or rent my industrial property? Can you lease up my commercial space? Can you sell my property, 100 miles away from where you're working? The answer to that is, of course you can, but you can't be all things to all people. So know what you're going to be focusing on and know what you're going to be doing with your business, because that's going to guide you as you get through your wealth building journey. So let's talk about wealth. My definition of wealth is having $1 more of passive income than you have in personal expenses. So you want to think about wealth in terms of a wealth ratio. So the wealth ratio is you take your passive income and you divide it by your expenses. So if you have a passive income of, let's just say, $10,000 per year in passive income, then you have expenses of $100,000 per year, then your passive income would be 10,000 divided by 100,000, which would be 10%. The goal is to get your wealth ratio to at least 100%, so you're covering all of your personal expenses. So again, if you have 100,000 of expenses, you want to try to have a minimum of 100,000 of passive income so that you can have your life can be funded. Your life can be funded without having to work. And then ideally, you want to grow that wealth ratio more and more, because once you surpass the 100%, that's technically becoming wealthy by my definition, because then you have more passive income coming in than you have in your personal expenses. So then you have the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And for me, that's the most important thing, is because I want to be able to have the freedom to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So when my kids go to college, I can travel more often, and I can explore the world and do all the things that you can't do when you're working all the time. So understand what your net worth is and track it monthly. So for those of you that don't know what net worth is, it's what you own minus what you owe. So what you own would be properties that you own, technically bank, money in the bank, all the things that you own minus what you owe. What you owe would be, the debt that you have to pay back on those mortgages. And what you're left with is your net worth. And you want to be tracking that over time so you can see if your net worth is growing or shrinking. And there's different methodologies as to what your net worth should be at different stages of your life, and how much money you should have in the bank at different stages of your life. I read an article the other day, they were talking about how much money should you have in your bank by the time you're 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. And the thought was you should have about six times your annual income is what you should have. I don't know if it was in your bank, but I think it was net worth, actually, what you should have in net worth. So there's different ways to look at it, but whatever it is, you want to make sure your net worth is constantly increasing over time. So what is wealth? Wealth is the gap between your ego and your income. Wealth is what you accumulate, not what you spend. Wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is an end game, not an annual game. So what do those things mean, right? A lot of people think you're wealthy because you drive a fancy car, you have a nice house, or you have, big boats or whatever all the things that people associate with wealth. That's not wealth, because when you buy a bunch of things, all you're left with is the things, not the money. And wealth is the thing that you don't see. Some of the wealthiest people that I know are some of the most modest people I know. They don't drive fancy cars, they don't frivolously spend their money, they're not flashy. Because why? Because those are not the things that are going to build wealth over time. Because over time, the more money you save, that's going to grow your wealth. If you're spending more money than you're saving, then you're never going to be able to build enough reserves to be able to start building that wealth up. So you must know value to recognize opportunity. So we're going to talk a little bit about investing in the mindset of an investor and how to start building wealth. So you must know value to recognize opportunity. So I run through this exercise with my kids. I say to them, how much does it cost for I don't know, an ice cream? How much does it cost for a bottle of soda? They know the prices of those things. So they say, okay, well, a bottle of soda is $1 or $2, whatever it is, right? So I said, all right, well, if somebody was charging $15 for a bottle of soda, would you know that that's not a good deal? They say, yeah, that's way too much money. I said, okay, so you do recognize the value of things, right? You recognize the value of certain things, but you have to start then focusing that on values of real estate, right? As real estate agents, you should know the value of real estate, right? If somebody is listing a property in your neighborhood and it's, $500,000 and it should be $400,000, well, it's too expensive. But if somebody's listing a property for $500,000 that should be $600,000, you recognize that that's an opportunity. So you have to understand the value of different things in order to recognize opportunity, because when you're an investor, you have to understand those values and those opportunities so you can jump on those quickly and take advantage of those opportunities. And then you must find opportunities to do deals, right? So first you have to understand the value to recognize the opportunity. Then you have to actually find the opportunities to do the deals. And then investing requires action. So I always say, you have to be, as an investor, you have to always be a shopper, but not always a buyer. And what I mean by that is the shopper is always looking. They're not always necessarily spending money and buying things, but they're always looking. This way, when a good deal comes along, when an opportunity comes along, they can jump on it quickly. If I'm looking at 100 deals a month and you're looking at 2 deals a month, when those 2 deals come up, they're both going to look, probably pretty good to you. When I'm looking at 100, those are just 2 of 100 deals that I'm looking at. They may be the worst 2 deals that I've looked at over the course of the entire month. So you have to actually be looking at deals and finding deals, and so you can actually take action when a good deal comes along. And then successful investing requires the right action, right? The right action, meaning don't overspend for things, buy at the right price, and investors take action. So 2 areas of wealth focus that we're gonna, I'm gonna try to train your brain on, and there's more than just these 2, but the 2 that I focus on are equity buildup and cash flow growth. So with equity buildup, what that is example of that is you buy a property and let's say you buy it for $100,000 and you put 10% down. So you have 10% or $10,000 in equity in this example. Well, now the next year goes by and you've paid off some of that mortgage, right? So you paid off maybe $5,000 of that mortgage over the course of the year. And let's just say it's worth the same amount as it was the year before. So it's still worth $100,000, but now you've got $15,000 of equity in the property, right? Because now you have your 10,000 originally, and then you have your 5,000 of you paid off your mortgage. Now the next year goes by, you pay off another 5,000 in mortgage. So now you've got $20,000 of equity, plus the property went up by 5%. So now it's worth 105,000. So now you have 25,000 in equity. So that's what I mean by equity buildup. So over time, you're going to pay off more and more of the principal of your mortgage if you have a mortgage on your property, And theoretically, the value of the property will continue to go up. But even if it doesn't go up, you're paying off the mortgage and you're building up equity in the property. So after the whole mortgage is paid off, then you sell the property and you have all that equity built up in the property that if you ever decide to sell it, you have it. The other portion of the wealth focus is cash flow growth. So you want to really focus on those two things. Cash flow growth is on a rental property, on an investment property, the cash flow that comes in off of that property. So you have a $100,000 property, you invested $10,000 in it. You are earning, I don't know, let's say $5,000 a year off of that property and net profits, meaning the rental income minus the expenses, minus the debt, the mortgage. Let's say you have $5,000 coming in. So that's, $5,000 out of $10,000. That's a pretty good cash on cash return on a property like that. Not all deals would be like that. But then the next year you raise rents by, 2 or 3% maybe. And now instead of getting $5,000, maybe you're getting $5,200 a year. And then the next year you're getting $5,500 a year. So that's the cash flow growth on that one property. But when we're talking about growth in a portfolio, that can be buying a property every year or adding money to your passive income every single year. So for me, I'm trying to grow passive income by X amount of dollars every single year. So that could be one property, that could be 10 properties. It doesn't really matter the number of properties for me. It's about the net profit increase of cash flow every year. So if you're having this long-term perspective, which is what I explained in the beginning, you're not looking at like 1 year blocks. You're looking at 10-year blocks, 15-year blocks, 20-year blocks to say, all right, if I add, I don't know, $10,000 a year in net passive income, net cash flow, then in 10 years, I will have theoretically, if nothing changes, I'll have $100,000 of passive income. In 20 years, if I stick to that plan, I'll have $200,000 of passive income, right? And think about this in a bigger scale. If you're adding 30,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year over the course of, a 10-year, 20-year period, that can be $1 million, $2 million of passive income every year or more, right? And plus you have the cash flow growth of increasing rents. Plus you have the equity buildup of potentially paying off some or all of the mortgages as you go. That's where you get true wealth. So buy it right, pay it down, pay down the mortgage, and then eventually pay it off. For me, my goal is within about 15 years, the goal is to try to pay off the mortgages that I have on my properties, because theoretically right now I wouldn't need to continue buying more properties if I didn't have any mortgages on my properties, because I have enough revenue coming in off of my rental properties if there were no mortgages to not have to buy more. However, there's mortgages and those take up, a good portion of the cash flow. So the goal is over time, pay off those mortgages. So by the time there's no mortgages on the properties, then there's a ton of cash flow coming in because you don't have that expense of the debt service or the mortgage. Next two things to talk about are earned income versus unearned income. So when we talk about wealth, we want to focus on unearned income. So the earned income is what you're doing right now, theoretically. It's money that you work for. That's you perform a job and you get paid for doing so. That's earned income. You do the work, you get paid. Unearned income is money that works for you. So the goal with wealth building is to be making money while you sleep. So I get paid my rents on the first of the month, every single month. I don't have to do too much to get that, right? Of course, I had to build the properties in order to get them to that stage. But now that they're at that point, I don't have to do quite as much to get that money. So that's money that's working for you. So you've invested that money into a property or into a business. And now that business or that property is producing money for you. That's unearned income, passive income. So have persistent effort and patient money. This goes back to the comment I made earlier about always be a shopper, don't always be a buyer. So be persistent in your effort to go out and find properties. Be persistent in your effort to start to build wealth and start to chip away at this long-term perspective of having this passive income. But be patient with your money. Don't buy bad deals. Be patient knowing that this money is building for the future. You may not get it back for 5 or 10 or 20 years. You have to have that long-term perspective. So when we talk about long-term, we talk about retirement, we talk about exit strategy. So when you get into investing, when you get into wealth building, you want to think about what your exit strategy is. So, you know, ask yourself these questions. What is your exit strategy? How old do you want to be when you exit or when you retire? How much money will you have in the bank when you stop working? And how much passive income do you want when your working days are over? So a strategy could be, I want to have $100,000 of passive income coming in within the next 10 years or in 10 years, right? So you're saying, all right, in 10 years, I want to have $100,000. So that means that every year you need to add $10,000 minimum to your passive income bucket, or your passive, or $10,000 of passive income to your portfolio. If you want to have $1 million within 20 years, right? It's $1 million divided by 20, right? So then you just add that amount every single year, right? So the passive income is going to be what comes in when you stop working. So back to the question, how much money do you have coming in if you stop selling houses tomorrow? That's going to answer that question. So another question I ask is, could you retire with no money in the bank? Well, a lot of people talk about retirement as if you have to have a certain amount of money in the bank in order to retire. The problem with that is that, what if you retire before you turn 65? What if you retire after you're 65? People don't plan enough for their retirement now when they're young or younger. So by the time they get to 65, they're like, shoot, I'm 65 now. I didn't plan properly. I don't have enough money coming in. But theoretically, if you have enough passive income coming in, you could technically retire with zero money in the bank, because zero money, let's say you had 100,000 of expenses and you had 100,000 of passive income, then you don't really need any money in the bank because your passive income is funding your expenses. Now, obviously that's not ideal, but realistically, you technically could. So there's some interesting statistics about retirement. So there was a survey done, and these were the statistics on retirement by the age of 65. So by the age of, 36% of the people, 36% of people never make it to their 65th birthday. So they die before they're 65 years old. 54% of people were living, but they were still on family or government support. So, right. So by the time they get to 65, they couldn't retire because they didn't plan properly. 5% of people, by the time they turned 65, were working because they still had to. They didn't have enough savings. They didn't have enough passive income. So they still had to work. Only 4% of people, by the time they turned 65, were well off, right? And only 1% of people, when they turned 65, were wealthy. Those are some pretty interesting statistics, because it's something we don't think about enough, and we don't have that long-term perspective. Our brains are not wired to have that long-term perspective. So if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, you're not thinking about, if you're in your 30s, you're not thinking about 35 years from now. You're not thinking about retirement. It's so far into the future. We're not programmed to think like that. However, I'm trying to reprogram you to think like that, so that you can start chipping away at that now and having a plan for whether you retire at 65 or 45, you still have a plan in place to be able to do so. So why do you think most people do not become wealthy? There's 5 reasons why most people do not become wealthy. First of all, it never occurs to them. Second, they never decide to do it. Third is procrastination. 4 is their inability to delay gratification. And 5 is their lack of time perspective. So let's go over the first one. People never become wealthy because it just never occurs to them. The average person grew up in a family that was wealthy. The average person never grew up in a family that was wealthy, or they never met or knew anybody who was wealthy. No one in their social group was wealthy. None of their role models were wealthy. No one they worked for is wealthy. Also, people who grew up in homes where parents are wealthy are much more likely to become wealthy as adults than people who grew up in homes where their parents are not. So for many people, it just never occurs to them that it's possible for them. And of course, if it never occurs to them, then they just never take any action or any steps necessary to make it a reality. So the purpose of you guys being on here, the purpose of having these conversations is so that you can start to think and be around more people that are wealthy, that are thinking about wealth building, so that you can be thinking about it as well and having those conversations. The next reason why they never decide to become wealthy is, or the next reason they never become wealthy is they just never decide to do it. So even if a person reads a book, if they attend a lecture or come to a mastermind like this, or even if they associate with people who are financially successful, nothing nothing changes until they decide to do something differently. Even if it does occur to a person that they could become wealthy, if they just did certain things in a specific way, if they don't actually decide to take that first step, then they end up just staying as is and nothing ever changes. So the primary reason for underachievement and failure is that most people don't actually decide to become successful. They never make a firm commitment or definitive decision that they're going to become wealthy. And what I want you guys to do today after this meeting is tell yourself, I want to become wealthy. I am going to become wealthy. I'm going to take the necessary action to become wealthy. I'm going to plan. I'm going to take action, and I am going to become wealthy for me, for my family, and for future generations of people of my family. And they mean to become wealthy, they intend to, and they hope to, and they're going to do it someday, but they never do it. They wish, they hope, they pray that they will make a lot of money, but they never actually decide that I'm going to do it. And this decision is an essential first step to becoming financially independent and wealthy. You actually have to decide to do it. You actually have to take action. If you continue to do what you've always done, then you'll continue to get what you've always got. The next reason why people don't become wealthy is procrastination. People always have a good reason not to be doing what they know they need to do to achieve financial independence. It's always the wrong month, the wrong season, the wrong year. Business conditions in the industry are no good, or they may be too good. The market isn't right. They may have to take a risk or give up their security. They say, maybe we'll do it next year. There always seems to be a reason to procrastinate. And as a result, they keep putting it off a month. Every month goes by, every year goes by, and then it's just too late. So even if it has occurred to a person that they can become wealthy and they have decided to change, procrastination will push all their plans into the indefinite future. So I know we're all busy right now. We're in our spring market. The market is hot. We're busy selling houses. Make sure you're taking the time to focus on your wealth building and to plan accordingly and to do that as well. The next reason why people don't become wealthy is their inability to delay gratification. And this is going, again, we'll talk about the long-term perspective again, but they can't delay gratification. They want to have that immediate, that instant gratification. Most people have an irresistible temptation to spend every single penny they make and whatever else they can borrow or buy on credit. That's not going to build you wealth. If you can't delay gratification and if you can't have discipline for yourself and refrain from spending every penny that you make, you're not going to be able to become wealthy. Remember, I talked about before, if you're spending more than you're making, that's not a formula for wealth. Theoretically, your expenses should be here, your spending should be here, and as your earnings go up, your expenses shouldn't really go up at the same pace as your earnings go up. The problem is that the more money people make, the more money people spend, and they never can get enough of a gap in between what they're earning and what they're spending. So if you can't practice budgeting as a lifelong habit, it's going to be impossible for you to achieve financial independence and wealth. And the last reason why most people don't become wealthy is just a lack of time perspective. So there was a study conducted by Dr. Edward Banfield from Harvard University in the 1950s, and it was published in 1964 it's called The Unheavenly City. And he studied the reasons for upward socioeconomic mobility. What he wanted to know was how you can predict whether an individual or a family was going to move upward one or more socioeconomic groupings and be wealthier in the next generation than they were in this generation. All of his research brought him to a single factor that he concluded was more accurate than any other in predicting success in America. And they called it time perspective. And this was defined as the amount of time that you take into consideration when planning your day-to-day activities and when making important decisions in your life. So time perspective referred to how far you projected into the future when you decided what you were going to do or not do in the present. So an example of long time perspective is the common habit of upper class families in England. They would register their children at Oxford or Cambridge University as soon as the child was born, even though he or she will not be attending school for 18 or 19 years. This is long time perspective in action. The young couple that begins putting $50 a month aside in a scholarship fund so that their newborn child can go to college or university of his or her choice is a couple with long time perspective. So that would be, if you have kids, that would be like a 529 plan that you start putting together when your kids are young or just born, or even before they're born. They're willing to sacrifice in the short term to assure better results and outcome in the long term. There's also some states that will allow you to pay when the time a kid is born. You can pay up front like $10,000 or $5,000. I forget what the number is. I know in Florida they used to have, it was like $5,000 you pay, and then you can go to any state school by the time your kids are in college, but you pay it, 18 or 19 years before they're ready to go. So people with long time perspectives almost invariably move up economically in the course of their lifetimes. So those are the reasons why people don't become wealthy. Let's talk about 3 steps to actually build wealth. So to accumulate wealth over time, you need to do 3 things. First, you need to make it. You need to make money. This means that before you can begin to save or invest, you need to have a long-term source of income that's enough to have some left over after you've covered your necessities. The next thing you need to do is you need to save your money. Once you have an income that's enough to cover your basics, you need to develop a proactive savings plan. And the last thing is you need to invest it. Once you've set aside a monthly savings goal, you need to invest it wisely. So your savings is your income that you make minus what you spend. That's your savings, and that's how you start to build wealth. So again, when I talked about before, you have to make money first, then you have to save it, then you have to invest it. And I'm going to talk about what my strategy is right now. So there's 3 parts to my wealth building strategy. And by the way, we just have a couple more. This is the last slide, and then we're going to go to questions. I know there's a couple of questions that were asked. I'm going to get to those as soon as I'm done this. So my strategy is there's 3 things. My job is I sell houses. I'm a real estate agent. I run a brokerage. I sell houses. So when I come to work every day that's where I make my money. That is my job. Then I take the money that I make off of there, and then I put that into flipping houses. So I build new construction houses or sometimes renovate stuff with the intention of selling those for a profit. So that's where I make the larger chunks of money. Then with those larger chunks of money, I take that and I put that into the longer term wealth building stuff for the passive income. And that's investing in real estate, that's investing in businesses. And that is the passive income that's coming, and that's investing into the business of the future. So again, in 10 years, when all my kids are in college, I have enough passive income coming in to travel as much as I want to travel and not have to worry about, that first one, which is the job part of it, which is, whatever that job means to you, whatever that thing you have to do every day, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, right? The goal is to build that passive income so you have the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Okay. So I know there's a couple questions here. I want to get to these questions. Then we're going to open it up and we're going to have a discussion and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about as far as wealth building goes. So I guess there's no questions, just some comments here. So what we're going to do with the rest of the time, however much time you guys want to take, is I want to answer any questions you have about wealth building, investing, strategies, and have a discussion around that, because I think people will be able to learn from the other people in this group that either have questions about it or are currently doing it themselves. So I'm going to open up the floor, unmute yourself if you have a question or comment for discussion, and we'll just kind of roll with that.
Noah?
Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Jessica. Nice to meet you. I'm with the Live Love Artemis team, Keller Williams, Philly. I started doing a little bit of investment a couple years ago. It's definitely been a challenge here in Philadelphia, I'll tell you. But my question would be, in moving forward in investment in today's market, finding a good deal. I'm sure that you utilize your agent license to kind of look for your deals, but do you have any advice right now while the market is so crazy as to like the best ways to find good deals?
Sure. So first of all, it goes back to the comment I made earlier about understanding the value of things and understanding when a good opportunity comes along. But where do you find those good deals? This is the same advice that I would give for real estate agents wanting to know how to build their business and how to get more listings, right? You have to be out on the streets talking to as many people as you can. I hear a lot of people say, well, there's no good deals on the MLS, or every deal that a wholesaler brings to me is overpriced. Well, the problem is that the stuff on the MLS is somebody else bringing those to the market. The stuff that the wholesaler brings, it's them going out and scouting out the deals and potentially marketing it up a few times. You have to be going out and finding deals yourself, talking to people, identifying what a good property is. I walk around with my son. He's 11 years old. I've been training him to do this for many, many years now. We walk around the street and he says, "Hey, Daddy, that house has window air conditioning units in it, or that has a pile of mail in front of the house, or that has, the paint is peeling off the side of the house. We should buy that and fix it up." Right. So he understands like the idea of what a good value is. So what I would tell you is like identifying stuff, like in that example, is you can just identify properties that, first of all, identify what type of investor you want to be, first of all, right? Me, I'm looking for vacant lots. I'm looking for bigger things. I'm looking for tear downs. I don't do a lot of rehab, so I kind of know what I'm looking for. But if you're doing like a rehab, right, you can look for a property like that, paint peeling off the side of the house and has mail piling up and window air conditioning. It probably needs to be rehab, most likely. So you identify that, you pick up the phone, you call people. There's a few different resources that I use to track people down. One of them being truepeoplesearch.com, TRUE, truepeoplesearch.com. You can look up people by address, phone number, or name, and you can. That's probably one of the better free services that I use to track people down. And then you just call people and, "Hey, I'm an investor in the area. I'm a builder in the area," or just, "Hey, I'm interested in buying a house. Would you be willing to sell it?" I recently bought a shore house. Never wanted to buy a shore house, but all of a sudden, after kind of spending a year in the house, I decided to buy a shore house. So I identified where I wanted to be, and last summer, I went around and I basically knocked on doors, emailed people, and called everybody within like a 3-block radius of where I wanted to be. Tell them, "Hey, I'm interested in buying your house. Would you be willing to sell it?" And of course, I got a lot of no's. I got a lot of people that ignored me, and I got a few people that said yes. And because of that, I was able to finally get something. And so that's what I would recommend. If in a market where there's low inventory, go out and be the one that finds the deals. Talk to as many people as you can. Get good relationships with commercial brokers, with people that have listings. The more you put out to the world that you're looking to buy and invest, the more deals will come your way. If I don't tell anybody I'm looking to buy stuff, I don't get as many deals. When I put out to the world, "Hey, I'm looking to buy properties," all of a sudden the deals start flowing in. So
No,
yeah, go ahead.
if you come across a property that's owned by an LLC and you can't find a member list like through the public sites and there's no website for the LLC, what do you like, how do you recommend reaching out to them in order to like work with them on buying a home or something like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a scavenger hunt. You have to be a little bit of an investigator. So the first thing I do is if it's a Pennsylvania property, I go to the PA corporation. I type in PA corporation search into Google, and you'll find a site that you can find the LLCs. Sometimes it provides the member names or an address. Sometimes it doesn't. But then you can look at the tax records or the water bills as to where the bills are being sent to. And then you can go to that address on public records and see if you can find the name of somebody there. Sometimes that may take you to another LLC. And then you have to go to another one. Maybe if you find the name of somebody, you look it up. Maybe you have to go to Facebook to see if the people are on Facebook. Maybe you have to search their name on Google to see if you can find it. I mean, it's a bit of a scavenger hunt once you get to that point, but there's sort of the different ways. But tax bills and water bills can find LLC stuff if the corporation search won't tell you. Also,
Awesome. Thank you.
Another thing you can do, Jessica, is you can pull the deed for the property. So through Philadocs, if you're in Philadelphia, there's a website called Philadocs, PHILA. I think it's either DOX or DOCS. I forget, but
Right.
and then you can pull the deed, and then you'll see usually the principal of the LLC will have signed the mortgage, or will have signed some type of paperwork that's registered there that you can track their names down.
Oh, the signature. That's a good idea. Thank you so much for your help.
Yep, you got it. What other questions do you guys have?
Hey, Noah, Brian Killian here.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. And nice discussion there. I really appreciate it. Nice meeting you too.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to know, I have two-part question here. Number one, how much do you rely on the wholesalers to find your product? And number two, I know that you just finished a building, I believe you did, on Spring Garden Street. Really beautiful property. I saw what you did. We were looking for a rental for my wife's daughter, and we actually went in there, and so it was pretty cool to see that. But how much are you now starting to move towards the fringe markets? I call them fringe markets, I guess, out of Center City, to look for better deals, like, Brewery Town, the north of Brewery Town, Sharswood, any of those areas there. How much are you starting to get into these fringe markets?
There's a lot of opportunity in those markets. It really depends on what your strategy is. I'm a little bit, I'm very particular about the properties I buy. I focus only in the core, pretty much the core Center City neighborhoods, or the sort of the core outlier neighborhoods. Mostly, like I said before, is because I like to walk to all my properties, or most of my Spring Garden's a little bit far from my house, but I can still get there in about a 25-minute walk, 30-minute walk. And so I don't go into those neighborhoods because I like to focus on the main area. So I pay a little bit more for my properties, but I usually get a little higher quality tenant. I mean, the majority of the tenants that I have over 700 credit score. They all have good income. So I don't have to really worry too much about like people defaulting on the rents. So I pay a little bit more for my properties, but I get a little bit more of a premium for the rents that I charge. And I just choose to stay in the neighborhoods that I know the rental markets very well. Like Graduate Hospital, I know that market very well. I own over 100 rental properties in that area. So I'm like, I can stay concentrated and control the market more in specific areas. Not to say I don't look in other areas, but every time I do, I can't accurately predict what the rental rates are going to be. I just don't know those markets as well, so I don't do it. But there's certainly a lot of opportunities in those areas.
And how much do you rely on wholesalers?
I don't rely on wholesalers very much at all. I rely on myself pretty much. Like I go out and I try to find these properties myself. That doesn't mean that I find everything myself. I have, of course, real estate agents that work on my team or at the brokerage. People just sort of know what I look for at this point. And I've bought deals from agents at the brokerage. I bought deals from agents on my team. I bought one deal from a wholesaler once ever, but the majority of the deals that come to me from wholesalers haven't been great, to be honest with you. So the wholesaler really is just the person that goes out and knocks on doors, puts the flyers out, and talks to the sellers. I just figure I can just do that myself and get to people, without the 2 or 3 people marking it up before it gets to me.
Got it.
You have to be willing to put in the work.
Right. Okay.
A couple questions in the chat box, and then we can talk to them. Randy asks, how can you invest in my projects? I don't really take on investors in my stuff right now. Any tips on finding a good contractor? Good contractors are kind of hard to come by because the best ones, nobody really wants to refer those out to other people because, first of all, everybody's so busy right now, and it's hard enough to get your good contractors to actually show up at your jobs. So it's hard to get people to give up their good contractors, and the ones that are not good, that don't have a lot of work right now, the ones that don't have a lot of work right now are probably not great. But I would recommend just continue to ask around, talk to people, and maybe, you'll find someone who's willing to give up one of their good contractors. You just have, sometimes you just have to test a few people out and get recommendations before you land on one that's good. I go through contractors. I mean, we have our core group of contractors that we work with that we know are good, and then some of them just, are not. We just test them out until they get better. A couple people asked me some questions privately. Do you have a standard profit margin that I look at to make per deal? I'm kind of don't go by what I say here, because I don't stick to this like to the T, but I try to build to an 8 cap, try to get my properties. I try to do an 8 cap. I know that's hard to find, but I build all my properties from scratch, so I can I build the value into my property, so I can build them to at least an 8 cap. I used to be able to build them to a 10 cap, but now stuff's so expensive, I can only really get them to 8 cap. And as far as cash on cash return, I want to get, they say like wealthy money is like 15+% cash on cash return. That's like wealthy money. So I try to get over 15% cash on cash return. Realistically, I try to look for more than that, 20 or 25%, but I'll do stuff that sort of fits the 15% plus hits the cap rates. And that doesn't mean, again, that when I say don't listen to exactly what I say. If, again, I own a lot of properties in a concentrated area, so it behooves me to get more properties in that area because I can control more of the market when I do. So I may buy stuff that's a 7 or 7.5 cap, but that's sort of like close to where I'm going to be if it's in a neighborhood that I just want to have more properties in. So sometimes I sometimes go off my metric if I want to, but you should really just be disciplined and try to stick with it as much as possible. Another question I got, are there any short-term investment vehicles you can use for your cash when you're in between development projects? That's actually a very good question. And it's actually something I'm trying to figure out myself right now. It's what I call dead money. And dead money is money that's just sitting in the bank, not earning more money, because you're not really making any money with it sitting in the bank. There's different things you can do. I can't answer that question right now, but I'm hopefully by the next presentation, I'll be able to, because it's something I'm trying to figure out at the moment. To not have that dead money, whether it's investing in municipal bonds or whether it's investing in the bond market or investing in other, liquid type of investments that may not give as high of a return as real estate, but it's more than the money sitting in the bank. So that's a good question. But no, I do not have an answer to that one right now. Somebody else asked, maybe a little off topic, but I mentioned about teardowns. How do I evaluate cost for teardowns? Let me answer that question on another presentation because that is a long answer that I have to give you a whole formula to answer that question. So it's a little bit off topic. I don't want to get too off topic right now.
No, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it, Ben.
Hey, by the way.
Hey.
All right. I completely forgot what I was going to say now. No, that's it.
Next.
If you have an ideal kind of, let's say you take all your income, what do you think are your ideal percentages in what I mean by that is, so let's say you got all your income, 30% goes to personal, 40% goes to investments, 10% goes towards vacations. Like, do you have a kind of split? Like, I know Jim Rohn talks about, I think he says like 70% personal, 10% active investments, 10% passive, and then 10% charity. Like, do you have a split that you kind of live by?
Not really. I don't really, and it wouldn't even be accurate if I did have it. It wouldn't be relevant, is my point, because if you make $100,000 a year, it's going to be a higher percentage. Your expenses to live your life are going to be a higher percentage than if you made $1 million or $2 million or $5 million a year, right? Because your expenses are not changing that drastically. So the percentage is not going to necessarily be relevant because everybody here is going to make different amount of money. But what I will say is I would say all of the investing that I do as of today, and I'm going to change this, but as of today, all of the investing I do is in real estate. I invest in some businesses too, but mostly in real estate or real estate related businesses. So I tell my wife all the time when she sees like big chunks of money in the bank account, I say, don't get too attached to that because that's going out next week to buy a property or business or something like that. So I try not to have too much what I call dead money. I try not to have too much money sitting in the bank at any given time because it's not making enough money in returns. I want to always be having that money moving around and trying to make more money with it. I can't give you a good percentage, Ben. I would just say like figure out what your baseline is, right? How much money do you need to fund your life, but not cutting anything out. That's travel, that's kids' school, that's your rent, your mortgage, all the things you like to do, go out to dinner, and not cutting any of it. Just what is that baseline number? And then how much over and above that do you want to put away in savings? Right? Savings would be money you want to invest or just money you want to sort of keep liquid. There's an amount that I like to keep liquid at any given time as well, because if it gets below a certain amount, I start to get a little bit nervous. So I still like to keep a certain amount of money in the bank at any given time. And anything over that amount of money in the bank, I'll use that money to invest. And I'm not giving you a number because it's not going to be relevant. You have to figure out what your number is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, you hear some people say like 30%, you know what I mean? If you can live on less than 30% of your income, then that's what financial freedom is, blah, blah, blah. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying on that because it depends on what your income actually is. Second question I have for you, just on the topic that you hit right there. You have like, let's say you have 20, 30 properties, investment properties. One of the biggest fears for me is properties can be expensive when it comes to renovation costs or major, maintenance. So how do you prepare for that? Like, I know most people say like, oh, you do 10% for maintenance or you budget 10% of that rental income for maintenance work. How do you stay on top of that? Because that to me is just like, it's overwhelming.
I would say it's just like any other business that you have. You want to have X amount of dollars in your reserve accounts for a rainy day, right? Same way, your personal life, you want to have a certain amount of money put away for a rainy day. Some people will say 6 months, 12 months of expenses. For business, typically 3 to 6 months is sort of the rule of thumb for how much money you want to keep in the bank account for a rainy day. 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses. It's the same thing for a rental for investment property. You want to keep X amount of months, 3 to 6 months worth. It's probably too much, but 3 months worth of money in the reserves put away for rainy day. And you're going to need that, especially on bigger buildings. Like I have a 19 unit building in University City that I did years ago, and it needed a new roof. It's just been a while since we replaced the roof and just needed a new roof. And it cost like $100,000 for a new roof, but we put money away every single month in reserves. So if you make X amount of dollars, you put X amount of dollars away in reserves, and then you distribute the rest, right? And you want to keep the bank account at a certain level, whatever that is, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, whatever that number is, and anything over and above that, you're going to distribute to yourself as profits, right? So it might take you a little time to build up those reserves if you don't put that money in as capital contribution from day one.
Gotcha.
I know that's not like an exact answer, but I'm trying to give you the
yeah.
Because every property you buy is going to be a little bit different.
That helps. Appreciate it.
You got it. All right, let me go back to the chat box here. There's a whole bunch of chats here. Let's see. Which of the positions you fill in your wealth building team, how do you vet them? Al, can you elaborate on that question? Is Al still on the call? Okay. Well, he's not on the call, so I'm not going to answer that question. Next one. Question I got is, Ben wants me to give his dead money to him.
I got one if I'm
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm just trying to read through the chat.
all right. One of mine is in there. As an agent, I'm with Keller Williams, Philly, and we've been I have a partner on team, Natalie, and we work together. We've been investing. We'll have 10 doors by the end of April, so that's pretty cool. But now we're cash poor a little bit. So if as agents that want to ramp up our income, what's normal to spend on marketing, advertising, and how should we be looking at that? Investing dollars in us to earn income to invest as a, you know what I mean, as opposed to directly investing.
Yeah, it's the old the developer's dilemma is what they call it. You know, a lot of developers just don't have a lot of cash in the bank. They're cash poor because they're always buying properties, right? And especially when you're buying rental properties, unless your strategy is to do cash out refis, a lot of times that money goes into the property and it doesn't come back. Like it's a long-term investment.
Yeah, we're lucky. We're doing a 1031 on one, and we've been good with the value add and the cash outs, but you know, we're kind of in between, and we want to invest more, so we want to earn more as realtors. So to expand our business, what have you done that works, or what would you suggest, or what, you know, we have some folks say it's 30 grand, it's 50 grand, it's 20, it's whatever, you know.
You invest in marketing. That's the question. How much do you
Yeah. Yeah.
The general rule of thumb for this is for your real estate business or for your investing business?
For real estate, to earn commissions to then invest.
Yeah, general rule of thumb is 9.2%. 9.2, that's from the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. 9.2% should be spent towards marketing and advertising dollars. 9.2% of your top line GCI. So if you're projecting to do $100,000 of top line commissions, then theoretically that'd be $9,200. If you're projecting to do $1 million in commissions, it would be $92,000, right? So you have to, when you put together your budget for your business at the beginning of the year, at the end of the previous year, you're going to project what you're going to do in that year, and you're going to build a budget out. And part of that budget is going to be that 9.2% for marketing dollars. And that money, that marketing category can be Facebook ads, that can be, you know, flyers and stuff that you send out, that can be Google AdWords and Instagram ads, like any marketing related type things that you're spending your money on. That's the general rule of thumb. And you want to, you know, you want to get a good return on that money as well. You want to try to get at least a 10% return on that money too. Does that help you at all?
Yeah, except for we're working kind of backwards from like, how much do we want to earn? So how much do we want to spend? You know, because we're
right.
You know what I mean?
Well, you want to lead with revenue. You always want to lead with revenue, right? So you don't want to lead with the expenses. I think the question you're asking is how do I lead with expenses to achieve what I want to achieve? But you want to make the money first through methods that don't necessarily cost you money. Then with the money that you make from those methods, reinvest that money back into the business to grow it even more. So a method that may not cost you any money is sphere of influence, past clients, knocking on doors, just listed, just sold, for sale by owners, like all the things that don't necessarily cost you money, then make money off of those types, open houses, right? Make money off of those types of things, and then reinvest those back into marketing dollars that are going to bring you more business, more leads, more exposure, more brand awareness, and then get a return on that money.
And do you have a CRM that you use? Do you use Command or what do you use?
Yeah, we use Command. We used to use Infusionsoft. We switched from that to Command. So our team uses KW Command. From the corporate level of our team, we use Salesforce. So that's what we use. All the agents on the team use Command though.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep. All right. So next question that we have here is, if we were dead broke and made 100,000 commission, where would you start if you had to start over? That's an interesting question, because I ask people that same exact question. If I picked you up on a plane and dropped you in the middle of an island somewhere with just a cell phone and a computer, how would you grow your business? That's the answer that all of you guys should be thinking about right now. Forget about dead broke. The question is, if I dropped you into a new city and when you didn't know anybody, and I just gave you a cell phone and a computer, how would you build your business? I'm not going to give you the answer to that question, because I want you guys to think. I want you to think about what you would do to grow your business. Who would you call? What would you do? What actions would you take? How many doors would you knock on? How many open houses would you do every week? How many social media posts would you do every week? How many lunches or coffees or breakfasts or drinks, dinners would you do with people every single week to meet people? What networking groups would you be a part of? What presentations would you give, and how would you provide validity and get in front of as many people? These are the questions that you have to answer, because these are all the different things that you have to do as a real estate agent to grow, or any business person to grow your business. And the answer to that question is what you are going to commit to in your business to grow your business.
Noah, strictly from wealth building though, would you say you would probably, with your wealth strategy, would you put it into, a flip, or, you just made your commission, that's your business is already rolling. What's your next move?
So your business is rolling, you're making money, you're asking what to do with that money.
Correct. Yep.
Well, first of all, you're going to feed your family. That's the first thing that you're going to do. And then pay your expenses. And of course, with expenses, that's a whole separate conversation, but sort of managing your expenses so you're not spending too much. And then with the leftover money, you're going to build the reserves in your bank account, right? So you have enough money in your bank account to feel comfortable, right? Remember, we're starting from $0, right? So maybe for you, that's $10,000 in your bank account, 50,000, 100,000, $1 million, whatever the number is that you feel comfortable having in your bank account to fund X amount of months of your business. Meaning, like, if you didn't make any money for X amount of months, 6 months, you still have enough money that you're not living on the street, right? So whatever that comfortable number is for you. And then once you get to that level, anything over and above that, you start to invest. Okay, so let's just say you want to have 100,000 in the bank before you feel comfortable spending money on other stuff. Great. Once you get to 100,000, anything over and above that, you want to build to a level, but you also may need a certain amount of money to buy a property, right? So you may need $50,000 to buy a property. So for you, you would say, all right, once I get to 150,000 in my bank account, then I'm going to buy a property, right? Because 100,000 is going to be just kept there and nobody's going to touch that. It's going to be used for expenses for a rainy day, or for, right, for COVID, right? There may be some businesses or some people that didn't make any money for a couple months during COVID. Right? That's that rainy day that we all talk about. It came this year for a lot of people.
And how did you decide whether it's better to rent out a property or just flip it?
Depends on what your strategy is. So earlier on in my investing career, I was trying to build that bank account bigger and bigger. So that's why I was flipping properties, because I would put the money in, I would sell it, I would get more money back than I put in. I would build another one, I would sell it, I would get more money back than I put in. So that bank account got bigger and bigger, right? Then it got big enough that I said, all right, well, now I want to start having money come in without me having to do stuff, right? Because I would sell a property and then I would just take that money and just roll it into the next deal. So there's never like enough money in the bank account, because I was always putting it into more deals. So eventually I wanted to start having passive income, making money, while I sleep. And again, like my focus shifted to now I have enough money that I can put it in there long term and not have to not need that money back like in a couple months, right? With the flips, I needed the money back in a couple months. But now there's a certain portion of the money that I can put into the longer term investment where I don't actually need the money back. And that money, now I've shifted my focus to majority of the time I invest in just cash flow assets at this point. I still do some new construction stuff too, but as a percentage of the whole of what I do now, it's new construction stuff to flip is not as much as the new construction stuff to keep now. But you got to figure out what your strategy is.
Noah,
Yes, sir.
what's up, man? Hey, you ever buy any properties from any of the real estate auctions in Philly or the counties?
I've tried to a long time ago. I used to try to do that, but every time I would go to the sheriff's sales, like every good property I wanted to buy either got stayed or postponed, or somebody else was bidding on it and the bank was bidding on it. So I never was actually able to do that. And now I think it's gotten harder, but you can do it. That's a good way to buy stuff if you're able to pull it off.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, the offer's still there, man. If you want to grab the rebounds, man, let me know, man.
Yeah. All right. I'll keep that in mind.
I seen you not too long ago walking down in South Philly, but I was moving fast. But next time I'm gonna stop and talk to you, man. We got some unfinished business.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
All right. I'll take one more question here. I got what do we tell people who are late in the game for wealth building? my answer to that question is you're never too late in the game for wealth building. No matter how old you are, you can still build wealth. Whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't really matter. You can still build wealth because while you're making money, you can still be investing it in things that are providing passive income for you and cash flow. So I would say it's never too late to start doing that. So you just may have to speed up the time frame. You may have to bring in outside investors if you can to sort of make the amounts of money that you're investing higher than if you're like earlier on in the game. You can use your own money and be a little more patient. So you just have to be a little bit more aggressive with, trying to build that, but it's never too late. All right. If nobody has any more questions, we can end it there. Thank you guys so much for being on today and sticking to the end. Hopefully
Thanks,
you guys
Noah.
got some value out of this
Thanks, Noah.
presentation, and we'll continue to do this. And I want you to still have that mindset of focusing on wealth building. But the key for today is go out, have the mindset of building wealth, and go out and take some action. Thanks,
Thank-
guys.